feeling that well. I'm still not feeling that well, but hopefully we'll be able to get through things. Okay, we began last time. We're at the end of the book of Shoftim, but really these are ma'asim that happened at the beginning. And we're looking at the story of Pilegesh Gibeah. And just 1 second. Yeah, Perek Yutes. So again, you'll remember it begins with the famous refrain that in those days there was no king among the Jewish people, and therefore the type of lawlessness that we're going to see was able to take place. So what happened was, you'll remember just the very beginning of the story, there was a Levite, we're not given his name, who lived in the mountainous area of Ephraim. Again, remember the boundaries. Yehuda from the south to Yerushalayim. North of Yehuda is Binyamin. North of Binyamin is the Chelek of Ephraim. So this is a Levi, Bahar Ephraim. Now it happens to be that since this is before there is a Beis HaMikdash, the Mishkan of Shiloh is in the Chelek of Ephraim. So remember that this is the Mishkan of Shiloh here. And it mentions that he had a Pilegesh. So again, we discussed last time very, very briefly the machlokas about the status of a Pilegesh. There's really two different machlokim. Number one, what is a Pilegesh? I'm not sure if I brought that out. And number two, is a Pilegesh permitted? Most Rishonim, including the Rambam, say a Pilegesh is simply a concubine, meaning a woman that you're not married to. There was no kedushin bichlal. But she's not just a prostitute. She is, only with you. She's monogamous at the time. So according to most Rishonim, Pilegesh means a woman without kedushin. So there's no halach of giving her a get. According to other Rishonim, Pilegesh is a woman with kedushin, but there's no kesuva. There's no financial protection for her in the event that she's divorced. So that's a machlokas. But again, we'll go with the Shitas Rambam that Pilegesh is below kedushin. So this is a woman who's not married to this Levi. Now the question is that a permissible relationship? So that's another machlokas. The Rambam says beferish, and the Shulchan Aruch so paskins, that it is absolutely forbidden to have sexual relations with a woman that you're not married to, even if it's monogamous, even if it's exclusive, even if she's not with any other person and you're not with any other person. The Rambam says that any sexual intercourse outside of marriage is a violation of a lo ta'aseh, because the Torah says, lo yiyeh kadesh, a man should not be promiscuous and a woman should not be promiscuous, and the Rambam understands that to mean lav dafka prostitution, but it refers to any intercourse outside of marriage. Now I mentioned last time, I don't want to go over everything, that today there is another problem, because today single women don't go to the mikveh. So if you're with a single woman who didn't go to the mikveh, you have a much more serious problem than the problem of a bia shalol without kedushin. You're over on the law of nida, which is a chiyuv kares. You have to be very careful, meaning if you are with a woman who's not a nida and you just have intercourse outside of marriage, so the most that you transgress is a negative commandment, which is pretty bad, but it's a negative commandment. You can get malchus for it and the like. If she's a nida, even if it's your wife, you're mechuyev kares. Now, remember that in the times of the Beis HaMikdash, and even then, before the Beis HaMikdash, where the laws of purity and impurity had to be kept very meticulously, single women did go to the mikveh every month, because nida is not just a prohibition to be with the husband. Nida is a law of tumah v'tayra in terms of touching food and contaminating vessels and the like. So it was actually very, very common for single women to go to the mikveh. Today, since the only relevance of mikveh for women is to matcha her to the husband, so today we generally do not allow single women to go to the mikveh. Now this raises some interesting questions. Every rule has some exceptions. In some communities, they allow women to use the mikveh on Erev Yom Kippur. Just like the men go for purity and tshuva, so some communities allow even single women to use the mikveh Erev Yom Kippur. And then you get into another very difficult shaila. Again, I'll just give you a difficult halacha l'maisa shaila. And that would be, again, it's a total digression, but it comes up. Let's imagine that you're a rabbi, right? You're a rabbi of a shul, and you have congregants who are not totally from yet, but they're in the process of being chosrei b'tshuva. And they are unmarried. They're a man and a woman who are living together outside of marriage in an exclusive relationship. Now, that relationship is prohibited. That relationship, according to the Rambam, is an iser d'oraisa. Lo sasa, of not being promiscuous. Lo yia kadesh. On the other hand, given the fact that if she doesn't go to the mikveh, she is a nida. Now remember, you understand this. Once a woman has her first period, she could have her first period at 11 years old. She remains a nida forever and ever and ever, even after menopause, until she goes to the mikveh. Okay, so l'maisa, the fact that the woman didn't have her period this month yet is irrelevant. She's a nida from the first menstruation. So here's the question. If they have relations when she's a nida, there's a chiyuv kares. If, on the other hand, she goes to the mikveh, that's going to downgrade the transgression from a chiyuv kares to a simple loisasa. So what should I do? If I could advise them to separate or get married, that would be best, of course. But let's assume I can't do that. They're not going to listen to me on that. They're not ready to get married yet, and they're not ready to separate right now. So, should I encourage her to go to the mikveh? You see the question. It's a hard question. On one hand, by saying go to the mikveh, I'm kind of giving a bracha. I'm kind of legitimating this relationship. It's a sanctified relationship, make it a kosher relationship. And I'm not supposed to legitimate Aveira, even if I can't stop the Aveira. I can't stop them, okay? But I'm not supposed to kosher it, right? We say giving it a gushpanka. Gushpanka is Aramaic, a seal of approval. So on one hand, for me to say, go to the mikveh, might be considered to be giving the seal of approval to a prohibited relationship. On the other hand, the same way that if I could save a person from sin, I should try to do so. So maybe that also applies if I save them from a more chomer aveira to a less chomer aveira. Is that also considered to be something valuable? So it reminded me a little bit of a maisa involving Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. That Rabbi Yisrael Salanter was from Lithuania. Salant is near Vilna. And Lithuania, of course, had many, many Talmidei Chachamim. He was from Vilna, very, very, very chashuv kehila. But for a lot of his life, he actually left his family. And even his Talmidim, his great Talmidim, were in Lita, in Lithuania. And he wandered around Germany and France, where most of the Jews were Reform. And he was actually doing kiruv. He lived in isolated places, very, very far away from religious Jewish communities for many years. Like every few months, every 6 months, he would go back to Vilna, be with his family, be with his Talmidim, his great Talmidim, and the like. So in one of his stops, he went to the German city of Königsberg. Königsberg was a major, or still is, a major port on the North Sea. Right, that's a part of the Atlantic adjacent to Germany, the North Sea. And the longshoremen, and this is an unusual profession for Jews, but the longshoremen of Königsberg were all Jews. There was a Jewish monopoly on the longshoremen. And the busiest day of ports, and this is still true today, it happens to be Saturday, I'm not sure why, but Saturday is a very, very busy day for ships to come to port and load and unload ships. So all of these Jews were Mechalelei Shabbos. They were loading, unloading, handling muktzah. They were doing all sorts of violations of Shabbos, and they were Jewish. So it is said that Rav Yisrael Salanter was madrich them, and he couldn't tell them not to do it. I mean, this is their parnasa. But he was madrich them how to do every activity with a slight shinoi. And you know, when you do a malacha with a shinoi, it's not mutter, but it's only an Isser D'Rabbanan. The Isser D'Oraisa is only if you do a malacha in the normal way. If you do the malacha with a shinoi, that's an Isser D'Rabbanan. So what did he do? He was madrich them to downgrade their transgression from an Isser D'Oraisa to an Isser D'Rabbanan. And he said that even though it's forbidden to violate Isurei D'Rabbanan, because it's not as chomer as an Isser D'Oraisa, he saw this as a positive act. So, one might be medameh, one might compare the situation of encouraging a couple who are living outside of marriage, that l'chol hapachos, the woman should go to the mikveh, so you're downgrading it from an Isser Kares to the Isser of being with a single woman. Now, of course, there is a nafkamina. In Rav Yisrael Salanter's case, you were going from a Doraisa to a Drabanan. Here, you're still going from a Doraisa to a Doraisa. There's still an Isser Doraisa, but l'chol hapachos, you're taking away the Kares. So this is a big, difficult question that people will have, that Rabbanim will have to face, and will do face. And that is, how do I balance the idea that I'm not supposed to give encouragement to Averos? I'm not supposed to validate Averos. I'm not supposed to show people a way to kind of do their Avera, versus the idea that I try to minimize transgression to whatever degree possible. So different poskim have different mahalchim. Some poskim actually say we ought to encourage mikveh in such a situation. Others say, if the relationship is going to be sinful, bein kach u bein kach, mimanishach, it's an aveira, I should not be in the business of trying to minimize the transgression. So there are different rules. Now the truth is, many mikvahs have their own rules that will not allow single women to go. But on the other hand, if a Rav would actually say to the mikvah lady that this person has my authorization, usually they would agree to the Rav's policy. But that's the issue. You know, there was in the secular world, there was a very similar controversy a little bit about during the AIDS epidemic, when AIDS was a real serious thing, and the main way that AIDS was transmitted was by unprotected sexual relations. So in high schools, there were many proposals to pass out to the high school kids free condoms, meaning they're going to have tashmish, they're going to do all the bad stuff, but this way will at least minimize the sakana. So once again, in the public sphere, there was a big argument about this. Well, wait a second here. Essentially, you're giving your imprimatur on sexual relations outside of marriage by giving them a way that they can do it safely. On the other hand, the svara would be that they're going to do it anyway, with me or without me. So this way, there might be an inyan of at least saving their lives in that situation. Or do you say, hey, someone doesn't have Aveira, let them take the consequences. What am I supposed to? I mean, the one way that AIDS would not be transmitted is by abstinence, right? Abstinence is 100% effective. Right, so lahavdil, the same type of shaila that we have by nida and in Rav Yisrael Salanter's situation, we have this as well. Okay, but that all of this is a bit of a digression. And by the way, it comes up a lot as well. I mean, let me give you another example. Just forgive me, because this issue of, do we encourage people to do a lesser Aveira to avoid a larger Aveira? That's the issue. Or do I say I shouldn't encourage it at all? Another issue is the definition of nida d'oraisa. Right? The Torah says you're not allowed to have relations with a woman when she's a nida. Now, let me explain something to you. Maybe you know this, maybe you don't. The definition of a Torah nida is very different than modern practice. Under Torah law, when a woman starts menstruating, let's say day 1, she starts menstruating day 1, she counts 7 days, and the night after the 7 days, she goes to the mikveh. She does not need, under Torah law, 7 clean days. She does not need days without bleeding. Under Torah law, even if she was menstruating for 6 days, even if she was menstruating for 7 days, if she stopped before sunset of the 7th day, she could go to the mikveh and she would be permitted to her husband. Of course, she stopped before the end of the 7th day. Now, for various reasons, I'm not going to get into all of the background, this is not the halacha as we practice. Chazal enacted that 7 days is not enough. There have to be 7, what are called 7 clean days. That means 7 days without bleeding. And as a result, we don't even start the count of the 7 days till 5 days from the start of menstruation. That would mean, Bizman hazeh, a woman has her period, we wait 5 days, then she checks herself to see there's no more bleeding, and then she starts 7 days, 7 clean days. And by the way, if the bleeding hasn't stopped, then it might be 6 days before we count the 7 days. It might be 7 days. It might be 8 days. Right? We don't start the 7 days until there's an absence of bleeding. Menstrual bleeding, I mean. Now, that means to say that Bizman hazeh, the minimum amount of time per month that husband and wives have to be separated because of nida, the minimum amount of time is 12 days, a 5 and a 7. And it might be a 6 and a 7, it might be a 7 and a 7, it might be an 8 and a 7. 12 to 15 days or more of separation. Now, under Torah law, that's very, very different. Under Torah law, the required amount of time was only 7 days of separation. And even if there was bleeding, as long as it stopped before the end of day 7, she can go to the mikveh. But, midrabanan, we're mechoyev to have the 5 and the 7. So, once again, you have a similar type of problem. What if you have a husband and a wife who are in the process of doing tshuva, and sometimes, as is often the case, let's say the wife is more frum than the husband, but it could be either way. And the husband is not willing to separate from any type of intimacy for 12 to 14 days. He says, too much. That's almost half a month. So the question becomes, do I kind of say, okay, when you're ready, we'll move to the proper observance? Or do you say, well, let her go to the mikveh after 7 days? Because at least on that level, you've taken away, it's the same question, you've taken away the Isser D'Oraisa, and you've downgraded it to only an Isser D'Rabbanan. You see, the common denominator of all of these questions is, when do we counsel people to do something that is sinful when it is for the purpose of preventing a greater sin if they don't do the lesser sin? Okay? Because if I don't advise you to go to the mikveh after 7 days, they're going to have relations while she's a nida d'oraisa. It's a chiyuv kares. Now, for the first 7 days, I can't help them. I mean, if they have relations for the first 7 days, under any definition, it's a nida d'oraisa. I can't do that. But at least after 7 days, we can do that. Okay, so again, I'm not here to give you any psak halacha on this, but it comes up a lot. But going back to Pilegesh, again, we'll go with the Rambam's definition that a Pilegesh is a woman without marriage. And the Rambam paskins and the Shulchan Aruch paskins, there's an Isser D'Oraisa, and the only exception is, this is one of the prerogatives of a melech. A melech is allowed to have nashim, wives, and pilagshim, concubines. So according to the Rambam, Pilegesh is only mutter lemelech. Ramban brings shitas, and Rav Yaakov Emden so paskins, that the notion of Pilegesh is mutter even to anybody. Now, Pilegesh is not the same as prostitute. Pilegesh means it has to be monogamous. It has to be, I don't mean monogamous in terms of the husband, he can have a wife, but monogamous in terms of the woman. But when he wants to send her away or she wants to leave, she can leave without a get. Obviously, the Shulchan Aruch does not paskin like this, so don't get any ideas. The halacha is we paskin that Pilegesh is also d'oraisa. But what's a little peculiar is, according to the Rambam, it actually means that this Levi is committing an Aveira. Right? I mean, if the Rambam says Pilegesh is only mutter to Melech, Pilegesh is not mutter to a non-Melech, then if I read that this man that's a Levi from Har Ephraim has a Pilegesh, he's actually doing a forbidden relationship. So maybe we just add that to the mix. In other words, if you were make a list of everything wrong in Pilegesh Begiva, so there's like 20 things that are going to be wrong. But most people don't note the fact that she's a Pilegesh. But the truth is, according to the Rambam, you already have a problem already, that he's in a relationship he's not allowed to have. Okay. So then it mentions, again, we're reviewing a little bit, that the Pilegesh left him, and she went to her father in Beis Lechem Yehuda, Beis Lechem. So remember, you can visualize the map. She went from Ephraim, south to Binyamin, south to Yehuda, and then until she reached Beis Lechem. That's where her father was. And she stayed there 4 months. Now remember, the Gemara in Gittin says that even though it says she turned against him, but Chazal say it was kind of his fault because there was a hair in the soup or a fly in the soup, and he got very, very upset, very angry. And Chazal say this is the important lesson of not putting excessive fear in your home. She was driven away because of his excessive reaction. So finally, now it's an unusual phrase. Pasuk Gimel says, Vayakam Isha. Isha, not Ish. Remember, you know your diptych here. Aleph Shin Hey normally is pronounced Isha, which means woman. But sometimes you have Aleph Shin Hey with a dot in the Hey. And that's called a mapik in the Hey. So you actually read it, not Isha, but you read it Isha. So some people really accentuate Isha. Okay, well, you don't have to be crazy over it. But Isha and Isha actually mean, I'm just emphasizing just for, actually are totally different words. Isha means woman. With the mapik hey, it's ha'ish shelah, her husband. Isha, her husband. So it's a little peculiar. It says, Isha, her husband went to retrieve her. So it's a little strange. Why would he be called her husband if she's a Pilegesh? If she's a Pilegesh, he's actually not her husband. Now, if I learn, like the Rishonim, that Pilegesh is a married woman without a ksuva, so indeed he would still be the husband. But if I go like most of the Rishonim, including the Rambam, that Pilegesh is a woman who's not married, then why does it call, again, I'm just focusing on the language, why is he called her husband? So perhaps the pshat would be that, she's gone for 4 months, so why didn't he do anything for 4 months? I mean, if your wife left, you would act before 4 months. I mean, there was no telephone, there was no email, he didn't really know where she was. The answer was he was angry. And you kind of, the way life works is you wait for the other person to come back. But after a while, he misses her. So it's not describing the halachic relationship, it's describing the emotional relationship. That he felt that she was like his wife, and he is going to look for her. Okay, now, how does he know to even go to her father? Did she tell him? It's not clear. Did she say, I'm going to my parents? Or did he just guess? We don't really know. But he goes to her father. The father gives him all sorts of hospitality. And it's almost excessive. He stays for 3 days, feasted, and then he wants to go on the 4th day, and the father-in-law convinces him, stay another day, etc. So it's as if, let's say, he comes on Sunday, for example. I don't know the days that he came, right? So Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, he's simply hanging around. Wednesday, he gets up to go back. Father-in-law says, have breakfast, whatever it is, and they're eating and drinking, and then already it's getting dark. He says, oh, he can't travel towards night. So he stays over Wednesday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Finally, he gets up Thursday, the 5th day. He wants to go back with his Pilegesh. And once again, the father-in-law kind of says, well, let's have breakfast, let's eat. And finally, the guy says, nope, we're going. So he leaves with his Pilegesh, and he also has a servant with him. He leaves with his Pilegesh and his servant on Thursday. I'm just making up. Assuming he came on Sunday, he leaves on the 5th day. That is Thursday. Why is the father-in-law trying to keep him there? Again, we don't know. There's no indication of what is going on here. Maybe he's worried about his daughter. Maybe he feels it's not safe for his daughter to go back. This man is too volatile. This man is too violent. This man is too angry. He wants to kind of keep his daughter as long as possible. We have no idea. But be it as it may, there is something to be said of, but why is this father-in-law extending the hospitality longer and longer and longer? And it's not like he hasn't seen his daughter. His daughter has been with him for 4 months. Right? His daughter didn't show up now. She's been there for 4 months already. Okay. So now it's Thursday. And I'm not saying it was Thursday, but it's the 5th day. And they're traveling. And the man is traveling with his Pilegesh and with his servants. And it gets dark. And it's dangerous to travel at night. Not so good. So they actually pass by Yerushalayim. Again, not so far really, because remember, they left from Bethlehem. Right? You've been to Kever. Well, you know where Bethlehem. Bethlehem is directly south of Yerushalayim. Bethlehem is adjacent to the southernmost neighborhood of Jerusalem, which is Gibeah. Kever is in Bethlehem. So they left Bethlehem. The sun is setting, and they're going by the ancient city of Yerushalayim. So the young man suggests, the Eved suggests, why don't we seek lodging in Yerushalayim? We have a city. Let's go in and seek lodging. So the Levi answers, this city is a city of Yevusi, meaning at this point in time, and this is actually one of the proofs, that this is at the beginning of the period of the Shoftim. Because remember, Yerushalayim was not conquered right away. And Yerushalayim was called Ir Yevus, the city of the Yevusim. Now, who is Yevus? I'll talk about in a moment. But essentially, the city was controlled, even after Yeshua's death, by Canaanites, by non-Jews. So the Levi comes up with the very wise advice that I do not want to seek hospitality in a city that is not controlled by the Jewish people. Perfect sense, right? If you're lost and you need hospitality, you're not going to go to Ramallah or Jenin or Nazareth and seek hospitality, because it is not likely, God forbid, that the person will emerge alive from that situation. Now, in terms of Yavus, I just want to remind you, there is actually a machlokes why Yerushalayim was called the city of Yavusi. Who is Yavusi? According to one interpretation, which is really the Pashut Pshat, the Yavusi are actually one of the 7 Canaanite nations. Achiti, Amori, HaYavusi. In other words, just like Amori, Canaani, right? There were 7 Canaanite nations. So according to this, Yavusi happened to be the Canaanite nation, or sub-nation, that was controlling Jerusalem at the time. However, there is another pshat. Chazal do not learn that way. Chazal actually learn that Yavus, in the context of Yerushalayim, is not a nation, but it's a very specific person. And this, whose name happened to be Yavus, and he actually was not a Canaanite. He was a Philistine, which is a different nation, Philistine. And this goes back to all the way when Avram made a covenant with Avimelech, the king of the Plishtim. So Avram Avinu made a covenant of peace. This is after Avimelech took Sarah, and Hashem appeared to Avimelech and told him to give back Sarah, and then Avimelech made a treaty of peace. And Avram said that he will not violate the treaty of peace for 4 generations. And that actually was not a proper thing to do. But because of this, Yavus is a descendant of Avimelech, the king of the Philistines, who was in Yerushalayim. And the reason the Jewish people could not conquer Yerushalayim then is because the 4th generation from Avimelech was still alive. So it wasn't that militarily we couldn't conquer it, but we were not allowed to conquer it because of the oath that Avram Avinu made to Avimelech. So that's a machlokas. Is Yavusi the nation of Yavusi, which is a Canaanite nation? Or is Yavusi a descendant of Avimelech? But either way, however you understand it, because of the Yavusi, the city was under non-Jewish control. And the man said, this is not a good idea, let's not stop here. And he suggested to his Eved, that, remember, Yerushalayim is right on the border of Yehuda and Binyamin. Remember, in fact, it straddles it. So let's continue into Binyaminite territory and try to find lodging in Binyaminite territory. Okay, I hope you can have at least a general picture of the map here. They're going northeast. Bethlehem, they go north to Yerushalayim, and then they decide not to stop in Yerushalayim, and they go into Binyaminite territory, and they seek hospitality. Okay, so they arrive into a Binyaminite city that is called Gibeah. Now, Gibeah just means a hill. That's all it means. But apparently the city was built on a hill, so the city was called Gibeah. So they come to Gibeah, and immediately things are very, very strange. They come and they sit in the street of the city, the main square of the city, and nobody gives them any invitation. Right? Strangers show up, and they're kind of waiting. They're in the main city square, and people are walking by. Now, is this intended to be a condemnation itself? In other words, is this a negative pasuk? I'm not sure, because maybe, I walk by and I see an unfamiliar face in the middle of Yerushalayim. I don't automatically assume they're strangers who don't have a place to live. So we don't know. Is there a remez here? I think later you'll see that the psukim are drawing a very, very close comparison to Sodom, although not necessarily in this pasuk. But it's likely that indeed there's kind of a remez that this was a Sodomite type of community. And as they're waiting for someone to offer them hospitality, an old man comes from the field. He had finished his job, and he himself is from Har Ephraim, even though he works and lives in Binyamin. Remember this show, we made this point before. Even though each tribe had its own chelek, there actually was a lot of migration, meaning it's not true that only Binyaminites lived in Binyamin and only Ephraim lived in Ephraim. Of course, Levium lived everywhere anyway. Levium lived everywhere because they had different cities. But even people from different tribes would migrate for Parnassa. So, this person is also from Har Ephraim. So we call this in Yiddish a landsman, right? Someone who comes from my community. And he sees the stranger. So it's almost like the pasuk wants to say, oh, the Binyaminites wouldn't care, but the one guy who cares is from another tribe. And he says, where are you going? Where are you coming from? And the man explains the situation. And the man even says, I don't even need food. We have food for the animals, food for ourselves. All we need is a roof to sleep under. That's all we're asking. And the man offers them hospitality. And in fact, he's a nice guy. He even says, and I'll take care of your food as well. You don't even have to use up your resources. So far, so good. He brings them home. The animals are fed. They wash their feet. Then they eat and they drink. And again, you'll notice the animals are fed because the halacha taka is, right? You have to feed your animals before you eat yourself. Right? That's what it says in Kriya Shema. Libhamtecha, you give to your animals, then v'achalta v'savata. Although the Magen Avraham asked the kasha by Eliezer and Rivka, first he drank, and then the animals. Right? Aren't you supposed to feed the animals first? So the Magen Avraham differentiates between drinking and eating. When it comes to drinking, human drinking comes first because if, God forbid, you're dehydrated, you could collapse. But once you've drunk your water, then you feed the animals before you feed yourself. Okay. So far, so good. We have a situation where the man and his Eved and his Pilegesh, 3 people, they have the hospitality of this man from Har Ephraim who lives in Gibeah. But then, seemingly out of nowhere, the house is surrounded by a group of hooligans, a group of ruffians, and they say to the Balabayas, take this man out of the house so we may know him. Now this is a euphemism for Mishkav Zachar. Now, this is deliberately written even in the same words as when Lot gave hospitality to the 3 angels, not knowing that they were angels. And in Sodom, you were not allowed to give hospitality to people. So what did the Sodomites do? The Sodomites surrounded the house. And this is in the Chumash. And they said to Lot, bring out these people, not knowing they were angels, so we may know them. Mishkav Zachar. And what did Lot say? Mamish, the parallel is so explicit. Lot said, one of the most craziest things, he says, please, these are my guests, do not afflict them, do not torture them. Behold, I have 2 daughters who are virgins. Let me bring out my daughters so you may know them. And the Sodomites refused. They didn't accept that offer. And as they approached the house to break down the door, you'll recall in the Chumash, the Malachim made them blind. And then Lot was told, we have to get out of here now. And Malachim revealed, that's the story in the Torah. Now here the story is very, very similar, but it ends a slightly different way. These Binyaminites surround the house. Give us this man so we may know him. And the man says, no, he's my guest. But here, behold, I have my virgin daughter. And of course he throws in the Pilegesh, which is really none of his business. But he says, oh yeah, there's also a Pilegesh here. I'll take out these 2 women. And you can be satisfied with them. The Bnei Binyamin refused. They say, we want only the guy. So what the Levi does is, he takes his Pilegesh, he pushes her outside, and once they see her, they spend the whole night raping her. So the guy's daughter didn't go out, but the Pilegesh was pushed out. She's raped the whole night. In the morning, she crawls back to the house and she drops dead on the doorstep. They didn't kill her. Well, I mean, they did kill her, but they didn't stick a knife in her. They abused her the entire night. She crawled back to the house and she died trying to get back into the house. Okay, this is the part of the story. What then happens is, the man gets up, the man had a good night's sleep. He gets up, time to travel. He opens the door, he sees her body, he thinks she's just sleeping. He says, "Get up, we gotta go." This is really unbelievable. We gotta go. He sees that she's dead. He lifts up her dead body, puts it on one of his donkeys, goes back home to HaRav with the dead body. He then cuts her body into 12 pieces. He sends a piece of her body, Federal Express, UPS, doesn't say exactly what the mail service was. He sends a piece of her body to every tribe. Now, obviously, not Binyamin, so we have to be counting Levi, meaning if you're not counting Binyamin, you get 12 tribes because Levi will be counted. So he sent a piece to every tribe. And when the tribes get in the mail, whatever they have, they don't know the delivery system, a piece of a corpse, all they can do is exclaim, "There has been nothing so repulsive, nothing so disgusting from the time the Jewish people left Mitzrayim." Meaning, there was nothing even in the desert that was as bad as this. And as a result, we're going to see the corrective action that they're going to take. Okay, so this is the incident of Pilegesh Gibeah, and it's going to result in a devastating civil war against the tribe of Binyamin, in which the tribe of Binyamin was almost extinct, almost extinguished. Yeah.
The Levim all live like in different cities, so how does he send one body part to the Levim?
Yeah, so we have to understand that apparently, the Levim did have a Nasi. So presumably, the piece was mailed to the head of each tribe. So wherever I don't know where the Nasi lived, but wherever the Nasi Levim lived, he was the one who got the piece, yeah.
They were upset because of the thing that the Binyamites did to the woman, or they're upset that they got a piece of body and they wanted to
So it's not really clear because it depends on what the guy communicated. Meaning, did he just send a piece of corpse? And I get a piece of corpse in the mail. I don't know what the story is. So the only thing I could be upset about is a corpse being mutilated. Or did he send it with a letter that said, "This is because of what happened," in which case the anger would be more towards Shevet Binyamin. But look at what's going on. I mean, look at, make a list of like everything that is wrong in this story. First of all, Pilegesh itself might be a wrongful relationship. That's besides the point. And the anger, the aim of Yisera, okay, those are maybe peripheral. But then we have the callousness, lack of hospitality, okay? But then it gets worse and worse. We have the demands for Mishkav Zohar. We have the Levi, not the Levi, the household, the Balabayas, offering his daughters. We have the man shoving out his Pilegesh. We have the rape. We have the callousness of the man the next morning not even caring. She slumped after a whole night of abuse, and he says, "Get up, we gotta go." And then the mutilation of the corpse. Like so many things. Ein melech b'Yisrael. Ish kol hayasher b'yeinav. When there's no melech, all the things that could go wrong. Okay, so this is really one of the tragic stories. And this is even before we get to the war, where literally tens of thousands of people get killed. And a tribe is almost obliterated. And apparently that has some cosmic effect. There is a Messiah that the Shekhinah rests on Am Yisrael only when there are 12 Shvatim. When you don't have 12 Shvatim, the Shekhinah cannot really rest on us. Now, you might ask me, well, today, the 10 tribes are lost. But as I say, that's not really true, because even though the kingdom of the 10 tribes was destroyed, but within even the 2 tribes, there were people of all the tribes. So, people sometimes say, well, I don't know my tribe, but it must be either Yehuda or Binyamin, unless I'm a Kohen or a Levi, because all the other tribes were exiled. That's not true. You can be anybody. You could be a Reuven, you could be a Shimon, you could be a Gad, because even though the kingdom and territory of the 10 tribes was vanquished, but there was migration. There were individual people of all the tribes. So as a result, we do have all 12 tribes. Not completely, of course, but we do have 12 tribes in Klal Yisrael today. But if Shevet Binyamin would have been exterminated, there wouldn't have been any Shevet Binyamin at all. So under those circumstances, the Chas v'Shalom, the Shekhinah could not rest in Am Yisrael. So there was something cosmically tragic about the near obliteration of Binyamin as well. Okay, we'll stop here.
Thank you very much, Rabbi.
Thank you for listening to this Ohr Somayach production. To find out more and to partner in our mission, please visit ohr.edu.